Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. Somebody made the good suggestion that I talk about sort of something to do with the fundamentals of the tradition that I teach in. This tradition is called Trika Shaivism or Kashmir Shaivism or Shaivite Tantra. It has lots of different names. But actually it's part of one of many what are called direct realization traditions, where the point is that something happens over time so that you are able to directly perceive and understand and come to embody your primordial essence nature, your enlightened essence nature, so that you're doing that by encountering reality directly, and not just by thinking about something or having a philosophy or a theory about something, but that you actually take steps, you do practices, and you work with a teacher to help you directly realize something about who you are. That's what self-realization actually is, knowing who you really are. And I was trying to think of a good way to say something about what is the essence of this tradition, and the one word that comes to mind is naturalness. The word for naturalness in Sanskrit is Sahaja. So what we are trying to come to recognize, experience, understand in an embodied way, not just a mental way, and to embody ourselves is naturalness, Sahaja. That's not really an easy word to understand, but it's easier to understand if we talk about what is the opposite of naturalness. Well, the opposite of naturalness in this tradition could be called constraint. It could be called contrivance. It could be called limitation. Now, naturalness is an unlimited quality of the base state of reality. It is just being natural, without any conditioning. Another good word for naturalness is the unconditioned, and for the state that most of us are in, the conditioned. We are conditioned. We are conditioned by, number one, the embodied experience and conviction that we are separate from everything else. That we are separate bodies in space, ending at our skin. This is actually the root conditioning. And it has a name in Trika Shaivism, which is a Navamala, and that means the root ignorance, or the root limitation. Right now, most of you are having an experience of being separate, or at least you think you're separate. And that root experience of being separate leads to all kinds of contrivances and ways that we tie ourselves up in knots. But basically, the fact that you're separate means that you feel vulnerable. You recognize in some way, even if it's not conscious, that you are fragile. And not only do you have a fragile body, but you have a fragile sense of self. Who are you? What are you made of? What are you presenting to other people? What's your identity? These are questions that most people are unconsciously and consciously engaged with all the time. So that sense of separateness gives rise to all the other forms of contrivance and limitation. It is the beginning. So we believe we're separate, and so we're defensive. We defend this little thing that we think we are. We think that we're separate, and so we're aggressive. We aggressively try to promote our own security at the expense of other people and beings. And we are aggressive if we feel there's any threat to us, aggressive and defensive. We have all kinds of contrivances and convictions that come out of that root sense of separation. We have cultural limitations, gender limitations and convictions, national and religious convictions and limitations, ideas about who we are and what we can do and what we can't do. Much of this, we just come into this life with that stuff. Everybody who's ever had a child or been around an infant knows that they come in with their own personality. They are not blank slates, as they used to try to convince us in the 19th century. But they definitely are not blank slates. So whether you want to call that genetics or karma, that's up to you. But but we already come in with a full complement of contrivance and conditioning. The conditioning that we experience conditions everything, our body, our energy, and our mind. We have certain ways that we move. We have certain characteristic forms of activity that we engage in or that we're afraid to engage in or that we compulsively engage in. We have stories about ourselves, what we do and what we don't do. We are really, on one level, bundles of limitation. Now, these limitations that we come in with also include our emotions, what is called energy in Tantra. So we have characteristic ways of responding to things. Some of us characteristically tend to have a short fuse. We get angry very easily. Some of us are chronically sad. Some of us feel like everyone's out to get us. Or some of us feel we'll never get what we want. We're lacking in something. We have all different kinds of feelings like that. Some of us are very prideful. Some of us are very competitive. These are all patterns of emotions that we either already had when we were born or they're somehow cultivated as we're living. All of these patterns, all of these habitual patterns of how we move and how our energy is and how our mind works and the thoughts going on in our mind, those are called karmas. And they are all, on one level, sources of unfreedom, because once we have identified, I'm this way and I'm not that way, and this is how the world is and this is how I see it, and we're constantly trying to shape this identity. Once we start doing that, then trying to cobble together this idea of a personhood, then we're kind of stuck with it, right? It becomes very hard to undo that conditioning and consider that there might be another way of moving in the world, or another way of feeling, or another way of approaching things. Even just in an ordinary sense, if we're not even talking about spiritual practice, forget about spirituality. How hard is it for you to eat something that you've told yourself you don't like? There's a wonderful story about Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, a teacher in the Buddhist direct realization tradition. And he cooked dinner for his wife and family, and he made roast chicken with a sauce that was made out of cough syrup. And he served it to his whole family, and his wife was trying to eat it, but finally she just said, I just can't eat this. And he just looked up, he went, you're too narrow. And he looked back down. We've told ourselves that some things are gross and some things are wonderful and some things are beautiful and some things are ugly and some things are acceptable and some things are unacceptable. We have all of this way of organizing everything in our body, energy, and mind, and everybody else's in the whole world. And it's just one huge, enormous burden. It takes enormous energy to maintain all of that. It causes all of our suffering. And it's what we are working to relax when we do spiritual practice. So that's on one level. That's on what we call a relative level. Relative means your experience that you're having right now, dealing with that. We have to deal with that. So we have this experience we call suffering, and it's because we have all of these habitual, compulsive ways of being in the world. We suffer because of that. But on another level, all of these different varieties of limitation are part of how this aware, awake, alive reality creates diversity. So if I have my cup here, this was once a pile of sand. This is glass. I don't actually know how it was made, but some glass is made by melting down sand and doing something or other to it. Out of sand and some color, and somehow this was made. But now this is no longer a pile of sand. When it was just a pile of sand, or when it was maybe just liquefied glass, it had more potential than it has now. It could have become an ashtray. It could have become a sandcastle. It could have become any number of things, right? But now it's fixed in this form. It's limited because now it's a cup. And in order to break it back down, to rediscover its infinite potential, you would have to apply some effort. We're in exactly that same situation. We have been fashioned by this reality through a process of conscious limitation to create these forms and these lives that we live in order to have diverse experiences. So from the perspective of God, if I can use that word, and when I say God, I just mean aware, alive reality, because it's just shorter to say God than aware, alive reality. And if anyone has problems with that word, every time I say God, you can think to yourself, aware, alive reality. You'll probably miss something of what I say next if you're doing that. But anyway. So on a relative level, when we get stuffed into a shape like this glass and we feel all rigid and contrived and we think, no, I just want to keep being drunk from. No, don't make me do it another way. It's too scary. No, get away from me. I might break. We're having all of these experiences of suffering, right? Because we're in this form and we experience ourselves as limited. So that's the relative level. On the absolute level, if this glass could remember that it's actually arising from unlimited potential, then it would just have a more playful attitude towards beingness, right? It might not be suffering. It might think, ooh, I'm pretty cute. Oh, I like this blue. So one of the things that really distinguishes this tradition and all the other direct realization traditions is that there's an attitude toward this world, this manifest world with all of its diversity, including the experience of suffering. There's an attitude towards it that it is actually an aesthetic creation of infinite, overwhelming degrees of variety that's being continually generated by this alive, aware reality. So that suffering itself is a relative experience. And that when we release our sense of limitation, when we begin to recognize what we really are, that we really are expressions of this unlimited reality, then the suffering can stop and we can just enjoy the diversity. Now, naturalness, which is what I started out this talk with, naturalness means being unconditioned. It means not being conditioned by the past, what happened before. It means not being conditioned by your fear of impermanence, what is going to happen. Right? It means not being conditioned by what you just did or what you just said. It means not being subject to compulsive repeating patterns. It means being in a restful, unattached state of spontaneity. It means being in touch with the livingness of everything and just resting in that and kind of seeing what happens. Moving spontaneously along with that. So the best analogy for this, and it's one I brought up the last time I was talking here, is swimming. That when you're swimming, you have to feel everything, and you have to, especially in the ocean, right? You have to go along with the waves. You have to feel the currents. You have to feel the depth. You have to feel everything around you. And you're moving in a very natural, spontaneous way in a state of receptivity and responsivity. That's something akin to the naturalness that I'm talking about. You are not going into the ocean saying, wave, get over there, because I have my plan, And if you're not over there in 5 minutes, my plan's going to fail. We don't swim that way. But we live that way. We try to force everything to be the way we want it to be in order so we can look good and so we can feel safe. Basically, those are our two motivations. We want to look good and feel safe. Looking good includes a lot of different things. It doesn't just mean physically looking good. It means, being successful and being admired and blah, 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 doing what we think someone wants us to do so we can be told we're good girls and boys. So that's what I mean by looking good. We want to look good and we want to survive. Those are basically our main motivations for just about everything we do. And so we try to order ourselves and order everybody else and order our lives in this very compulsive, contrived way. Not swimming. If you went into the ocean with this attitude, you would drown. So naturalness means you are not aggressing on reality. You're not aggressing on yourself. You're resting in that base feeling of aliveness, which is called living presence, as if that were an ocean. And you are swimming in that, and you're being responsive, and you are trying to be skillful in responding to what that living presence is doing with you as you're moving along, right? This is naturalness. It's a state not of non-activity, because anybody, as the Bhagavad Gita teaches us, and which is patently obvious anyway, if you're alive, you're going to be doing something. Even if you're just sitting there breathing, you're going to be doing something. There's no such thing as not doing anything. But you can move in the world without being defensive and aggressive. You can have a way of being in the world that is utterly relaxed, experiencing your continuity with this living presence, and moving, even very dramatically moving sometimes, with no sense of aggression or trying to make anything go your way or fix anything or manipulate anybody. We spend most of our time manipulating something or other, right? Trying to get what we want. Naturalness means not doing any of that. Naturalness means that you have to feel living presence. So everybody right now, you can feel it. You can't feel it in the way that someone who has done decades of spiritual practice can feel it, unless you already have. Everybody now, just close your eyes for a minute. And it has nothing to do with closing your eyes. It's just we're distractible, so closing your eyes is easier for most people. And I just want you to have the experience right now of looking into the space behind your forehead. You don't have to move your physical eyes. Just gaze with your inner eye into the space behind your forehead. And just have an experience of the quality of that space. When you're not trying to do anything, don't try to make it a spiritual experience. You'll ruin it. It's just the space behind your forehead. That's all it is. And now I want you to have the experience of the whole shape of your body. Try to just have one whole experience of the shape of your body with no detail, just a shape sitting on the floor. One whole experience. And now again, gaze into the space behind your forehead with your inner eye. And now, as if you were pouring water into a vase, I want you to pour that same quality of the space in your forehead into the whole vase of the shape of your body. Just fill your whole body with that. As if you were just a shape filled with that lively darkness. And now I just want you to rest in that. You're not doing anything. You're just resting in that experience. You're not making anything out of it. You're not visualizing, you're not meditating, you're not doing anything. You're just resting. Complete resting. And you'll start to notice a feeling of livingness throughout your whole body. Just a feeling of livingness. Try to feel the livingness, the living presence of your own existence. Right now, you're not doing anything but living. Immerse yourself in that living presence. Try to not be experiencing anything but that. It's a very real, palpable feeling of aliveness. Feel your own aliveness. And now just for one moment, open your eyes a little bit and see if you can sense that same aliveness everywhere. In the space in the room and just everywhere in the room. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. So you are an aspect of this pervasive aliveness. That's what you are. And when you're being natural, relaxing body, energy, and mind, you are just being in that aliveness, in the ocean of aliveness. And you are in a state of open, uncontrived spontaneity. This is what naturalness means. You have no precondition. So if you had any kind of experience at all of what I was saying, then you know how easy it is. Why is it so easy? It gets much deeper than what you just experienced, much, much deeper. But why is it so easy? Because it's your own nature. It's who you are. This pervasive, natural, alive awareness is what you actually are. And so what could be easier to get in touch with than your own nature? The trick is that we're very distracted by our compulsive patterning. And so we don't pay attention to alive awareness. And the whole point of this practice is to begin to pay attention to that, deepen your experience of it, be able to relax into that, and be operating from that base all the time, rather than from the base of your karmas. That's what naturalness means. Everything that we're doing in this practice is to relax the contrived distractions that we are subject to, so that we can just be resting in this livingness that's going on all the time. We're not creating anything, we're not fixing anything. We're simply just clearing the way. We're clearing things out. This is a subtractive process. It's not an additive process. It's actually a destructive process. Okay? Because we have to undo some of the patterns that we have. So we can discover this primordial livingness, primordial creativity, primordial being. That is who we are. It's not like out there. It is out there, but it's also here. So we are like water pouring itself into water, or a wave pouring itself into ocean. That's the feeling, which maybe you got a little taste of if you could. And everything that we need to discover this is already present in our own body, energy, and mind. We can work with ourselves to discover this primordial livingness, because that's what we are. It's very, very, very simple. It just takes a long time to relax. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.